We're back with another
Hey.
episode of How to Hyvä, and it's been too long.
Far too long.
Gonna increase the output of videos, and today we're introducing the first UI components that we've built. We've been working on some menus that are ready to use and plug and play in your Hyvä team. We're going to show where you can find them, how to install them or put them into your team, and perhaps play around a little bit with them to show the versatility of them, I guess. Yeah, so let's jump in. I'll start sharing my screen. Are you seeing that?
Good, yeah.
Cool. Okay, so in GitLab, you will now find the Hyvä UI repository directly in Hyvä Teams. And in there you find the following structure of components, and there's a first directory with menu. There's a bit of a README here with some instructions how to use this or how these UI components are meant to be used. And the basic idea is that these will be ready to use phtml files that you throw into your team. You replace a file or you add them through layout XML, and you put them into your project. What you should not do is clone this whole project into, or this whole repository into your project and then link to the files in the cloned directory, because then you get all these unwanted side effects. We might change components in the future, update them or improve them or remove them or deprecate them. So these are really just code examples and a starting point for you to super rapidly introduce new features or UI components into your team. And then it's your own version. So it lives in your project and it shouldn't live still in this repository. So that being said, here we are in the menu directory, and we've moved what was before the menu static. We had top menu static in the default theme together with the dynamic top menu, I think. And the dynamic top menu is still what you find in the default installation, so the simple drop-down menu, and the static link is the file that used to be in the team where you just have some very basic links that are listed. It's basically the menu that we use at Hyvä.io right now. This one, it lists simple URLs, and then if you toggle to mobile, like so, they're listed in the block underneath. That is the menu, simple static links.
Pretty simple.
There's nothing new there, but from the beginning, when we put those two alternative top menus in the team, the idea was that that would at some point move to the UI library. What's new is these two menus, and the first one is a 4-column mega menu, and the second one is basically also a 4-column mega menu, but it starts with a vertical drop down. So it's first a vertical listing of categories, and then it opens up horizontal columns. We'll show that in a second. So let's look at the 4-column mega menu. There's some instruction here. We'll follow those in a second. We intend to add screenshots with these menus. At a later point, we'll also have a demo site where all the components are. You can view all the components and see them in action and look at the source code. That'll be only for customers, of course. It won't be public. Basically, how tailwindui.com also works. when you have access, you can view all the components and see how they work, play around it. For now, we have the GitHub repo that will remain in the future. Also, if you have this website where they're listed. So you can see here drop downs, and then this is a 4-column layout with demo data. In standard Magento, you also only have 2 columns, but this is a 4-column grid. And it shows you can also add, if you want, static blocks on the left or the right. And let's see how you would implement this menu. So starting from the top, we have to copy after version 1.8. Let's look at that one. We copy desktop phtml into header menu in our team. Or if it doesn't exist yet, you create this file in your team and you adjust the Tailwind config.js as described below. Okay, so let's start by taking the desktop file. It's this one. And we just copy the file contents. We jump into our projects. And in this case, this is the demo environment. So it's the demo storage you just saw. Everything is installed in Vendor, but we can just quickly show those changes in here instead of in app design, where you would normally do this. So let's jump into the default theme and Magento theme, templates, HTML, header, menu. So one thing that we changed from 1.17 to 1.18 in the default Hyvä theme is previously both the mobile and desktop menus were in top menu HTML, and we've made a little change. This is a wrapper file that loads the mobile and desktop version. So that's still backwards compatible. We didn't change the file name, and we made it in such a way that if you already have a top menu HTML in your team, that still works if you're updating to 1.18. That's also why there's 2 instructions at the top of this this file. There's one for 1.8. It's the top HTML, top menu HTML, which also includes the mobile menu, but this is only the desktop menu. So that's why we decided it's much better to split these. So this is the standard desktop HTML file, and I'm going to paste in the one from the repository that I just copied, and then save it. Then we get back to the Tailwind configuration that we need to change. And in variants, we need to extend opacity and pointer events. Otherwise, we're missing some CSS classes. So in my team, I would go to Tailwind config.js, and in variants, extend. Which one do we have? That's not what I needed. Okay, so my opacity is now listed twice. Disabled is already there, so those 2 were added. I can take this one out. And we have pointer events Hoover group. So for Hoover group pointer events, classes are generated. I'm not going into detail how variants work. That's very well documented in the Tailwind documentation. Okay, then important, we need to rebuild our Tailwind CSS file. So I'm gonna create a def bundle, because then I have all the classes available and I can play around in the front end a little bit, changing the layout and the design. But normally you would always run a prod bundle before you publish something to your website, of course. Was there anything else? No, that was it. We can add some static blocks. We'll get to that in a second. Refresh. There we go. We have a top menu. And let's look a little bit at how the structure, how the structure looks. I have to admit, it works better with your own data. Of course, a mega menu asks for a lot of data, a lot of categories, and an extra level. The standard Magento demo data doesn't contain that many categories. So it's a bit, you have to use a little bit imagination here, or we can throw in some extra menus here programmatically. So let's trigger hover on the menu item, and we can see a little bit how this has been built. So the hover is on the div, and then we have a link, and within it there's an absolute position block. So that's the dropout. We're using CSS only here. The menu works entirely without JavaScript. We only enriched it a little bit to put the positioning of this block. We're calculating the top position, and that's only because we wanted to take into account the situation where you would have a multi-line menu, because then we can't absolutely position. We had a little bit of issue. The mega menu that drops out wouldn't be exactly positioned right. So that's why if you mouse over an element, you can see right here, you can see the position change. If I mouse over it, well, you just, yeah, so you see it's calculated. But it works. If you don't hit this edge case, it wouldn't even be needed to use JavaScript for that. But yeah, we try to build it as versatile as possible. It's even, I guess I can show that you could even put this in here, because we try to build all the components independent of their position on the page. So we should be able to throw it in here. That didn't work. Where did it go? We can do this the proper way. Let's say,
yeah, maybe
right
that's
here. So we could also say we want to render the top menu desktop on CMS index, so the home page, and we just go here after content 1. We throw it in here. It needs to have a unique name, of course, because it's already declared. There you go. So you can see it doesn't depend on the position of the page. And you could tweak it here a little bit. Say you want to give the whole thing PG container darker, a bit of shadow. It could be placed anywhere. So yeah, that's something that we put a lot of effort into. That also, if you would place this on the next line, that would also be very simple to demonstrate. I could take this whole container and just say, I want this, not order 2, I want this order 4. And maybe order 5. Does that not missing? Why would it still apply small order 1? Ah, here it is. Okay, so it still triggered this breakpoint. So now it should, yeah. So normally you can use order to really simply toggle where your components go to show. So I can put it at order 5, and then it goes to a new line. And you could make more customizations here, just making one top menu item that drops out, and well, it really depends on the structure of your categories, of course. What's also nice to show, we'll refresh the page. We thought about accessibility. If you tap into the page, first the logo is loaded, and then you can see it has a nice hover in the focus state. I can tap into the submenu. So this all happens with my keyboard, pressing tab. So we try to take into account accessibility as well, as good as possible. And it might be nice to show this CMS content that can be added through the admin. You can add a static block. It's also described here. Mega menu block, and you can add left or right, and then a category with the ID of the category where you want to add the block. So here's the block that you just saw. I want to edit it. It's straightforward CMS block content. It's an image with a fixed height and some placeholder. So you can see that's automatically added here. If we would change the name to left.
The block title doesn't matter, right? It's just the identifier.
Yeah, exactly. You could add any HTML here. You can take any HTML from Tailwind UI or from any Tailwind library, or write your own. You could even add in your own slider here with multiple banners. You can do whatever you want. It's just a placeholder where a block is being loaded. So saving this to block left, category 20, refresh it. And it goes to the left. And said I would do this before. Let's do it now. Over, set it active. You can see this is a grid made out of 4 columns. It would be super easy to change this into 3 columns, of course. Let's do that here. Grid calls 4. Let's change it to grid calls 2. And in case you would have more menu items, so it scales down. And of course, with so many, you would better maybe even take 4 columns. Still fits nicely.
Nice. So if you change the ID now to ID 11, that whole thing should appear under men, the CMS block, I mean, right?
Yeah.
Maybe anytime, just so it's clear, okay, we have the left and the right identifiers, and we have the IDs for the category IDs. And absolutely. I think one thing I really like is that this is works without any module. It's just the front-end template and the IDs there. So it's kind of low level, but very easy to extend and customize.
Yeah, we with the UI components in UI library, we really try to build front-end elements that don't introduce necessarily back-end logic. We don't want to extend the back-end. I think that's something you should do with extensions. We might add some view models in the future for certain UI components. If we would need to fetch this category data and we wouldn't have had that view model yet, if we need to fetch CMS content in a different way than we did now, we might introduce a view model. Perhaps that will go into a helper module, the same as we have for the default theme right now. So that would always be safe to update, and it would be a utility module that goes together with the UI components. But indeed, this is as basic as possible, but also as versatile as possible. So I think it would be nice to also show the other menu, which I think is even more versatile. Let's read the instructions. We didn't make this immediately 1.0 compatible. It wouldn't be hard to make the same changes in the top menu.phtml, but you need to update Tailwind to the latest version. Otherwise, the plugin that we're adding here won't work. We'll get to that after I copy it in the phtml file. So again, this is just one phtml file. We copy the contents, and let's take that menu we added to the homepage away here. And here we go. Oh, actually, it's nice. Maybe if we just keep that. So we go back into menu desktop HTML, replace the file, save it, and then check the instructions. For the Tailwind configuration, we need to do 2 imports or declarations at the top of the file. So in Tailwind config.js, at the top of the file, you see there's some other declarations here. We're also going to declare selector parser and plugin. Tailwind has a plugin mechanism, and by default, we use the forms and typography. That's just the pros classes. So that's a library that you pull in. We don't want to depend on libraries, so we took a library, which you could also use, but we don't want to depend on that in case it would be deprecated in the future or whatever. We just take the current functionality, and we copy this whole bit in here and paste it. So that basically works the same as just including the plugin that you'll find here. Then you install it into your Tailwind project or setup. We chose to do it like this instead. And then again, we have some extents to do, opacity and pointer events you need to copy in, but those are identical to the one that we already inserted for the previous example. So you see nothing changes. So that's all. We basically only need to add the plugin. And for the plugin, we needed 2 extra functions here. So rebuild the Tailwind configuration, Tailwind CSS. And let's see if that works. All right, so for this one, we chose to put it on a new line. It's not a requirement. You can change the order. Same as we just showed. You can just say this one doesn't have order 4, but order 2. And again here, that probably, yeah, we need to take away the width full. So it works like this, same as the other one. And you get the full menu between the logo and the card icon and everything. So this is what the vertical dropout looks like. You get first the second level categories are listed here vertically, and then you get the 4-column submenu items listed in the grid, so horizontally, but well, if you have more, of course, it increases in height. Here again, if you tab into the page, this also works entirely from the keyboard. There's a very light amount of JavaScript here, only to set the height of this container. If you don't have Java, without JavaScript, it would use a min height for half the screen height, I think. So we set that height with JavaScript when you mouse over these items, or when you tab into one of those items. Now, what's nice about this one, what you often see is that the menu on a top level is reduced to one category that's called products or assortments or categories. And then you get the first level of categories, or it's actually placed to second level. So it would be nice if we look at this one again, if we would make that change. And there's always different ways to do such a thing.
You just go to the admin and change it there, right? But it's maybe more fun like this.
If you have enough time, we can look at me and the admin moving all the categories into a main category, but we can just quickly simulate the same right here by just changing the structure of the menu items that's being loaded. So let's say we're creating a new array, and the whole menu, the whole original menu structure goes into a key that's called child data. Oh. So that's one key that we need. Then we might need a ID. Let's just set that to 0. We need a title, I think. Let's see.
URL, I think.
Assortment. And we need a URL. This one won't have a URL, so let's set it to a hash. So it's not a real category. ID title URL. Is that what we use? URL? No, title should be name. Okay, so let's change this to name. And we basically just move the whole menu structure into one main category. So we wrapped it, so to say. Let's reload the menu on the page. There you go. It's just one menu item. Theoretically, we could add another item and say this is called about, and it doesn't have child data. I don't know if the ID is required, but so we have about and assortment. Interesting that it sorts the items, or that would be because of the, yeah, okay, because this is a, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just the order of the items in the array. Should probably just iterate over.
Oh,
right?
I entirely missed that. I added
Always
the first one.
Task effect, huh?
Okay. Okay. So this is something that you often see, like the assortment is placed into a top level item, and you see this now works really nicely. And then you have some static links to about or contact or support or any non-real category. So this is a really simple way to customize the structure of your menu and still keeping all native admin functionality. And here again, we can say we want to put this at order 2, and it's centered. And then still it works really nicely. I think for this kind of menu, it works nice if the items start at the left, because you otherwise you easily navigate diagonally, and you mouse out of the submenu. So I would prefer to put this to the left. And you might even want to add a hamburger icon here and make it an on-click event instead of a hover. And then you really have this application kind of menu, what you see more and more these days. yeah, maybe nice to note the mobile menu is not affected by any of these changes. So you can set the breakpoint where you want your desktop menu to start rendering. In this case, it's after tablet. So starting at 1024, you get the desktop menu. Yeah, so I think this is really, really versatile. And again, this also works, you can see here. It works in other contexts, so it's not dependent on the position of the page. It is nice if you would give this, back to the classes, if you would give this order 4 and the full width, and then maybe container darker, and maybe a shadow, and we place it, you would do this with layout XML, of course, but you would place it maybe after the header. And maybe you would remove the margin top, so it sits right after the header. The shadow could be a bit thicker. So let's make it a shadow LG maybe. Need to increase the Z index? No, I guess not. And then let's make this one sticky top 0. Ooh la la. You could extend this even a bit more, and you could add in your logo here on the left, make that visible only after a certain scroll position. So you could check with JavaScript. That's something you can only do with JavaScript. So you could enrich it that if you scroll past the original location, the logo is also shown here in the menu on the left, and you can click it and you go back to the home page. So your header basically scrolls along with the whole page. You could even add the card icon here, duplicate the card logic in here, or use JavaScript to move physically these 3 elements into the menu bar. Again, those are all nice little touches you can add to this. So yeah, I really like this. It's again, it's simple but versatile. What do you think?
Love it. Yeah, can't wait to actually use that a bit and see what I can come up with. Seems like a great building block. And I guess that's the main intention of this UI library, right? It's like Legos. So this is a wonderful brick. Can use
Who doesn't like Lego?
Building. Love it. It's awesome. Wow. Yeah, so cool. Also good to see how you can customize it, because to be honest, I'm still learning a lot of how to do this kind of work in the front end, and that was great to see. Thanks.
Very welcome.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. Just building it. It's the nicest things to do. We're gonna continue. I think these components are really ideal to make even more variants without changing the logic too much. But I imagine that the last one that we just showed also works really well on a home page. Which you often see is that you have a vertical menu and then maybe a banner next to it, and you can mouse over the menu items and directly jump into a category. So you often have a home page or a landing page menu overview, and that would be super easy to build on top of this logic or using this logic as a basis. Yeah, regarding the UI library, we're going to move on to adding some footers, which I think is a very common requirement. We'll add a few variations there. Some page components, I think, content layouts. So different callouts. Now we just have these 2 blocks on a home page with static data. Similar kind of layouts will be built using Tailwind. So you can throw those into your static pages or even in just in your CMS because we have the JIT compiler. So that all should just work.
Yay.
Yeah, so
makes everything, building stuff even faster. And that's so good.
Cool.
Make me
Okay.
very happy.
So I think we've covered this in quite depth. Let's round this one up and think of what next video we're gonna produce.
Lots to talk about. Nice. All right.
Cool.
So thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for
And
watching.
see you soon.
Ciao.
Bye.